I was deep in spreadsheets when nature called. The morning coffee had done its job, and I needed a quick bathroom break. Nothing unusual, just 5 minutes away from my desk to handle basic human needs. When I came back, my computer screen showed a new email that made my blood freeze completely. It was from payroll, copied to my boss, Preston. Subject line, wage deduction, unauthorized break time. My hands started shaking as I read the details with growing disbelief. They had docked 15 minutes of pay for my bathroom break. 15 minutes for a 5-minute trip to relieve myself. I stared at the screen, reading it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating or misunderstanding something obvious. The email was signed by Preston, my boss, who had personally requested the deduction with clinical precision. My cheeks burned with embarrassment and rage that threatened to consume me entirely. Who tracks bathroom breaks like this? I looked around the office, wondering if anyone else could see my humiliation written across my face. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the principle and the complete lack of basic human dignity. They were treating me like a child who couldn't be trusted to manage basic human needs responsibly. I wanted to march into Preston's office and demand an explanation. But I forced myself to stay calm and think strategically. If I exploded now, I'd only make things worse for myself. I needed to think this through carefully. I found Preston by the coffee machine, his 3rd cup of the morning if I was counting correctly and accurately. He was chatting with Kelly from accounting, laughing loudly about some weekend golf story that seemed incredibly detailed. The conversation had been going for at least 20 minutes while work piled up everywhere. I watched him lean against the counter, completely relaxed and carefree, while my desk sat empty with urgent client emails piling up relentlessly. When he spotted me approaching with the printed email, his face shifted into that fake managerial smile I'd grown to despise. "Everything okay?" he asked, stirring his coffee slowly and deliberately. I held up the printed email, trying to keep my voice steady despite my rising anger. "You docked my pay for using the bathroom?" His smile didn't waver even slightly. "Company policy is clear about break times. Bathroom breaks should be taken during designated lunch periods, like everyone else does." "Everyone else?" I glanced at Kelly, who suddenly found her shoes very interesting and avoided eye contact completely. Preston had been standing here chatting for 20 minutes, but somehow my 5-minute bathroom break was the major problem. "I understand," I said, swallowing the words I really wanted to say to his face. He nodded approvingly, as if I was finally learning to behave like a good employee. "Glad we're on the same page." I walked back to my desk, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't going to take this lying down anymore. Back at my desk, I opened a private chat with my coworkers, Cecilia and Nico. "Did you guys see what Preston did to my pay?" I typed with trembling fingers. The responses came immediately, faster than I expected from both of them. Cecilia sent a screenshot of her own timesheet with mysterious corrections from last week that made no sense. Nico shared a photo of Preston's calendar, packed with strategy meetings that were really just wandering around the office doing absolutely nothing productive. "He's been doing this to everyone," Cecilia wrote with obvious frustration. "I've been keeping track secretly." Nico added, "Yesterday he spent 40 minutes talking to the receptionist about his expensive car troubles, then marked me late for coming back from lunch 2 minutes past 1 o'clock. I felt my anger transform into something more focused and purposeful than before. This wasn't just about me. Preston had been systematically bullying the entire team for months. We'd all been suffering in silence, thinking we were alone in this nightmare situation. "Want to start documenting everything properly?" I asked, knowing this could be dangerous but necessary. The typing indicators appeared immediately on both screens. Cecilia: "Yes, absolutely. Count me in completely." For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone against impossible odds. We were a team again, and Preston had no idea what was coming his way. I created a private document that night with today's date for reference. I started listing every unfair rule he enforced on us versus his own contradictory behavior patterns. The list grew longer than I expected, stretching across multiple pages of detailed evidence. He required us to log bathroom breaks meticulously, but took hour-long coffee conversations without any accountability whatsoever. He marked us late for being 5 minutes past start time, but rolled in 30 minutes late himself twice a week without explanation. He demanded we eat lunch at our desks during busy periods, but disappeared for 2-hour client lunches every Friday afternoon during crunch time. I included dates, times, and witness names for everything that had happened recently. Cecilia and Nico contributed their own evidence through encrypted messages sent throughout the evening. Cecilia had photos of Preston leaving early on days he marked her for staying late, which was particularly infuriating. Nico had recorded Preston's voicemails from his sick days that clearly showed he was at sporting events having fun. By midnight, our document was 12 pages long and incredibly detailed. I saved it with a strong password and leaned back in my chair with satisfaction. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was concrete ammunition for battle. Preston thought he could hide behind his manager title, but we were building a bulletproof case that would expose everything. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Juliet from HR, knowing this could make or break everything. She was known for being fair but tough, the kind of person who didn't tolerate nonsense from anyone at any level. I printed out the bathroom break email and walked to her office with steady, determined steps. Juliet looked up when I knocked on her door, and her professional smile tightened when she saw the papers in my hand and my serious expression. "What can I help you with?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from her organized desk. I placed the email in front of her without saying a single word, letting the evidence speak for itself. She read it carefully, her eyebrows rising slightly with each line of text. "This is concerning," she said quietly, her tone shifting to something more serious. "Is this standard policy now?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral but firm. "Docking pay for bathroom breaks?" Juliet shifted uncomfortably in her chair and reached for her filing cabinet. "Let me check our employee handbook immediately." She pulled out a thick binder and flipped through several sections with practiced efficiency. "Our policy states that reasonable personal breaks are expected and shouldn't exceed 10 minutes. She looked back at the email with obvious concern. 5 minutes is well within reasonable limits. I pulled out my phone and showed her Preston's calendar carefully. "Does this policy apply to everyone equally?" Juliet's expression hardened as she scrolled through the evidence methodically. She didn't say anything for a long moment, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. That afternoon, everything fell apart during a client call that would change everything for us. Our biggest account, Bloom Industries, was furious about missed deadlines and broken promises they'd been expecting. They'd been calling all morning repeatedly, but Preston was nowhere to be found anywhere in the building. He'd marked himself as in important meetings on his calendar, but his office was empty and his car wasn't in the parking lot outside. Cecilia, Nico, and I scrambled to handle the call without any context about what Preston had promised them previously. The client was shouting about deliverables that none of us knew existed or had been briefed about. "Where is your manager?" demanded Mr. Bloom with obvious frustration. "We were told he would handle this personally and professionally." I looked at Preston's empty chair and felt my stomach drop like a stone. We were drowning, and our supposed leader had abandoned ship during the crisis. "He's temporarily unavailable," I managed to say while trying to maintain composure, "but we're fully committed to resolving this issue immediately." For the next hour, we worked frantically to piece together what Preston had promised versus what we'd actually delivered to them. By the end of the call, we'd managed to calm Mr. Bloom down, but barely, and with great effort. When I finally hung up, I stared at Preston's empty office and felt something click into place permanently. We didn't need him at all. We'd just saved our biggest account without any help from our manager. I spent my lunch break analyzing Preston's calendar patterns from the past 3 months with forensic precision. Cecilia had given me screenshots, and the pattern was obvious once I mapped it out systematically on paper. Every Monday after a big deadline, Preston called in sick without fail or reasonable explanation. Every Tuesday when our CEO, Mr. Hawkins, visited other departments, Preston scheduled mysterious off-site meetings that nobody could verify. Every Friday afternoon during busy season, he had urgent client calls that required him to leave early and avoid overtime. I printed out the calendar and highlighted each absence in bright yellow marker for emphasis. The pattern looked like Swiss cheese, full of holes that happened to coincide with the most stressful or scrutinized times perfectly. Nico leaned over my shoulder during his break to examine the evidence closely. "It's like he has a sixth sense for avoiding actual work," he whispered quietly. "Or responsibility of any kind," I added, tracing the highlighted sections with my finger thoughtfully. This wasn't random bad luck or legitimate business needs at all. This was calculated avoidance and strategic abandonment of duty. Preston had turned disappearing into an art form, leaving us to handle every crisis while he protected his own reputation carefully. I folded the calendar printout and slipped it into my desk drawer securely. Patterns don't lie, and this pattern was about to become very useful evidence. I ran into Juliet in the hallway the next day, completely by accident, but perfectly timed. She was carrying a stack of files and looked stressed about something important. "How are things going with your team?" she asked casually, but I caught the underlying concern in her professional voice. "We're managing well under the circumstances," I said carefully, choosing my words with precision. "Is Mr. Hawkins planning any department visits soon by any chance?" Juliet's eyes flickered to the folder in her hand with obvious recognition. "Possibly. Why do you ask?" she replied with measured curiosity. I shrugged, trying to look nonchalant while planting the seed strategically. "Just want to make sure we're prepared properly. You know how Preston likes everything perfect when leadership comes around to visit." She studied my face for a moment with analytical eyes. "Yes, I'm sure he does." There was something in her tone that made me think she knew more than she was letting on about Preston's behavior patterns. "If Mr. Hawkins does visit, will there be advance notice for preparation?" I asked innocently. Juliet shifted the files in her arms and glanced around the hallway cautiously. "Usually 24 hours, she said with a slight emphasis. "But sometimes these things happen more spontaneously when needed." The word spontaneously hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. I nodded and smiled politely. "Good to know. We'll be ready either way." As she walked away, I felt a spark of possibility growing inside me. Sometimes the best opportunities are the ones that happen spontaneously. Preston's office door was cracked open when I walked past after lunch. His computer screen was still on, showing a confirmation email for a long weekend trip. The dates caught my eye immediately. Next Monday through Wednesday marked as personal days on his calendar. But on our team schedule, Monday was marked as a critical deadline day for 3 major projects. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then took a closer look. The hotel reservation was for a ski resort 3 hours away. The booking included spa appointments and golf reservations. This wasn't a family emergency or medical issue. This was a vacation planned during our busiest week of the quarter. I memorized the dates and details, then quickly walked back to my desk. My heart was pounding, but not from guilt. I felt like a detective who just found the missing piece of evidence. Preston was planning to abandon us during our most critical deadline, probably expecting us to work overtime to cover for his absence. But this time, we'd be ready for him, and more importantly, other people would be ready for him too. I called a quiet meeting with Cecilia and Nico in the empty conference room. "I need you both to start documenting everything," I said, sliding them each a notebook. "Every task Preston assigns to us, every deadline he dumps on us, every client issue we solve without him." Cecilia's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Are we finally fighting back?" she asked. Nico cracked his knuckles. "What's the timeline?" I pulled out my phone and showed them Preston's vacation confirmation. "He's disappearing next Monday through Wednesday, right during the Bloom deadline and the Hayline presentation." Both of them stared at the screen in disbelief. "He's actually doing this again?" Cecilia whispered. "Just like last month with the Peterson project." I nodded grimly. "Except this time, we're going to be ready. I want every email forwarded to us documented. Every phone call we take for him logged. Every hour of overtime we work because of his absence recorded." Nico smiled for the first time in weeks. If he wants to throw us under the bus, he's going to find out we've got good reflexes. We spent the next hour creating our documentation system. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan. The next morning, Preston called me into his office for what he called a routine check-in. He was holding another printed timesheet, this one marked with red corrections. "I noticed you took an extended lunch yesterday," he said, pointing to a line item. "Extended?" I looked at the sheet. "That shows 55 minutes. Our lunch break is 1 hour. Preston shook his head. "Lunch is 45 minutes. The extra 10 minutes have been deducted from your pay." My mouth fell open. He'd been giving himself 90-minute lunches all week, but was now claiming our break was only 45 minutes. "I can show you the employee handbook," I said carefully. "It clearly states—" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "I don't need to see the handbook. I know company policy." Something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped into place, like a bone setting itself. I smiled at him, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Thank you for the clarification," I said. "I appreciate the feedback." Preston looked pleased, probably thinking he'd successfully intimidated me again. If only he knew that every word of this conversation was being burned into my memory for future reference. Cecilia pulled me aside after work that evening. We were in the parking garage, completely alone. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, looking around nervously. "About documenting everything." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "If this all goes public, if Preston gets exposed, you'd actually be really good at his job." The words hit me like a physical weight. I'd been so focused on stopping Preston's abuse that I hadn't considered what would happen after. "You think so?" I asked quietly. Cecilia counted on her fingers. "You already handle half his responsibilities. You're the one who saved the Bloom account. You know every client personally. The team actually respects you." She paused. "And you're not a complete narcissist, which would be a refreshing change." I laughed despite myself. The idea was terrifying and exciting at the same time. I'd never seen myself as management material, but maybe that was because I'd been watching Preston's version of management for too long. Real leadership looked nothing like what he did. "One crisis at a time," I said, but the seed was planted. Maybe this wasn't just about getting revenge. Maybe it was about getting justice. I spent the weekend crafting the perfect email to Juliet. It needed to sound professional and positive, not like I was trying to set Preston up. "Hi, Juliet," I wrote. "Our team has been working really hard on some high-profile projects, and I think it would be great to showcase our collaborative process to Mr. Hawkins. Would he be interested in seeing how we handle client management during high-pressure situations? Next Monday would be ideal, as we'll be managing multiple deadlines simultaneously." I read it 5 times before hitting send. No accusations, no complaints, just a proud employee wanting to show off her team's hard work. The beauty was in what I didn't mention, that Monday was the exact day Preston would be at a ski resort. Juliet's response came within an hour. "That's a wonderful idea. Let me check Mr. Hawkins' schedule." Then, 20 minutes later, "He's available Monday morning for a department walkthrough. Please ensure your supervisor is present for the presentation." I printed both emails and put them in my desk drawer. Then I walked to Preston's office and taped a note to his monitor. "FYI, Mr. Hawkins visiting Monday a.m. Juliet requested you be present." Preston glanced at the note and laughed. "We'll see," he said, already looking past me toward the window. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. I'd prepared our client files, updated all our project dashboards, and made sure every detail was perfect. Cecilia and Nico had done the same. We'd left no room for Preston to blame us for anything. I kept checking my phone, but Preston hadn't responded to the note I'd left on his monitor. No text, no email, no acknowledgement that he'd even seen it. Part of me wondered if he'd surprise everyone and actually show up. But I knew better. Preston had never chosen responsibility over his own convenience, and he wasn't going to start now. I set 3 alarms for Monday morning and finally managed to fall asleep around midnight. My last thought before drifting off was about Preston's empty office chair and how it might look with someone else sitting in it. Someone who actually cared about the team and the work. The thought didn't scare me anymore. It felt like hope. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I got to the office 30 minutes early and checked the parking lot first thing. Preston's silver sedan wasn't there, and the reserved spot with his name on it sat empty. I wasn't surprised, but seeing that empty space still made my heart race. This was really happening. He was really going to abandon us during the most important presentation of the quarter. I unlocked my computer and found his text in our group chat sent at 6:47 a.m. Feeling under the weather today. Food poisoning. You guys can handle the Hawkins meeting. We'll check in later. The sick face emoji at the end was like a slap in the face. I screenshot the message and the timestamp, then walked to the break room. There in the sink sat Preston's coffee mug from Friday, still dirty. His desk calendar showed today's date circled with "Important Hawkins visit" written in red ink. I took photos of everything. Preston might be good at lying, but he was terrible at covering his tracks. At 10:15 a.m., the elevator doors opened and Mr. Hawkins stepped out with Juliet beside him. The entire floor went quiet except for the hum of computers and air conditioning. I stood up from my desk and walked toward them with a smile that felt more natural than I'd expected. "Good morning, Mr. Hawkins. We're really excited to show you how our team works together." He looked around the office, his eyes scanning the desks and stopping on Preston's empty chair. "Where's your supervisor?" he asked, his tone neutral but his expression focused. The question hung in the air like smoke. Cecilia and Nico had appeared beside me, professional and ready. "Preston is out sick today," I said simply, letting the situation speak for itself. Mr. Hawkins's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in the scene. 3 prepared employees, detailed presentations ready, and 1 conspicuously absent manager. Juliet was already taking notes on her clipboard. "I see," Mr. Hawkins said quietly. "Well then, let's see what you have to show me." I pulled up our project management dashboard on the main conference room screen. Every single task showed the same pattern. Assigned by Preston to one of us, completed by us, with Preston's name nowhere on the actual work. "Here's our current workload," I explained, walking Mr. Hawkins through each project. "As you can see, we're managing the Bloom account renewal, the Hayline presentation, and the quarterly compliance report simultaneously." Mr. Hawkins leaned forward, studying the screen. "These were all due this week?" I nodded. "Yes, sir. We've been coordinating closely to make sure nothing falls through the cracks." Cecilia clicked to the next screen, showing our communication logs. Every urgent email was addressed to us, not Preston. Every client call was handled by us. Every deadline was met by us working overtime. "And your supervisor's involvement in these projects?" Mr. Hawkins asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Nico spoke up. "Preston assigned the tasks to us at the beginning of each project." The unsaid truth was obvious. Assigning work and disappearing wasn't the same as managing or leading. We walked past the break area on our way to see the client files. Preston's favorite coffee cup sat on the counter, half full and cold, with a timestamp sticker from the coffee shop downstairs reading, "Friday 4:32 p.m. Juliet pointed to it subtly, and Mr. Hawkins noticed. "Sick since Friday?" he asked quietly. I didn't need to answer. The evidence was literally sitting right there. We continued to my desk, where I'd prepared printed copies of all our client communications. "The Bloom Industries situation last week was particularly challenging," I explained, handing him the file. "We had to rebuild their entire project timeline because of some miscommunication." Mr. Hawkins flipped through the pages, seeing email after email with our names on them, solving problems and managing relationships. "Your supervisor wasn't involved in the Bloom crisis?" Cecilia shook her head. "He was unavailable that day." Mr. Hawkins closed the file and looked around the office again. His expression had shifted from neutral to something harder. "I see a pattern here," he said quietly. Juliet was writing faster now, her pen scratching across the paper. At exactly 1:47 p.m., the office door opened and Preston walked in wearing sunglasses and carrying a smoothie. He stopped dead when he saw Mr. Hawkins sitting at my desk reviewing our files. The color drained from Preston's face so fast I thought he might faint. "Oh," he said, pulling off his sunglasses quickly. I wasn't feeling well this morning, but I thought I should." His words tumbled over each other like dominoes falling. Mr. Hawkins stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Food poisoning, wasn't it?" he said, referencing the group text. Preston nodded vigorously. Yes, terrible stomach bug. But I'm feeling better now, so I thought I'd check in on the team. He gestured weakly toward us, as if we were children who might have misbehaved in his absence. The smoothie in his hand was bright green and expensive looking, the kind you get from fancy health food places, not the kind you drink when recovering from food poisoning. Everyone in the room noticed it, but nobody said a word. The silence was louder than any accusation. Mr. Hawkins walked Preston through everything we just reviewed. The project timelines, the client communications, the workload distribution. Preston kept trying to interrupt with explanations. I believe in empowering my team, and I encourage independent decision-making, and they're all very capable. But every explanation just highlighted his absence more clearly. Juliet opened her folder and pulled out a calendar printout. Preston, can you walk us through your schedule for the past 3 months? She asked. I watched his face as he recognized the document. It was the pattern analysis I'd given her weeks ago, showing all his convenient absences. I don't understand, he stammered. This looks like you're systematically absent during every crisis, every deadline, and every executive visit, Mr. Hawkins finished. Preston's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked at me, then at Cecilia and Nico, as if we might jump in to save him. But we just stood there, professional and silent. I can explain all of these, Preston said desperately. Some were legitimate business meetings, some were approved personal days. Juliet flipped to another page. Here's your time-off requests. None of these absences were pre-approved. The final nail in the coffin was Preston's own digital trail. Juliet had printed out his computer activity logs, showing exactly when he was online and when he wasn't. The timestamps didn't lie. On his sick days, his computer was often active, but only for personal emails and social media. On his emergency meeting days, his location services showed him at restaurants, golf, courses, and shopping centers. This is a privacy violation, Preston protested weakly. Actually, company computers and phones are monitored for security purposes, Juliet replied calmly. It's in your employment contract, Section 12. She turned to another page. Here's last Monday, when you marked yourself as having an all-day client meeting. The log showed Preston at a sports bar from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., based on his company phone's GPS. The client meeting was moved, he said frantically. I forgot to update my calendar. But his desperation was obvious now. Every excuse sounded more pathetic than the last. Mr. Hawkins had stopped asking questions. He was just listening to Preston dig his own grave deeper with every word. The bathroom break incident came up last. Juliet pulled out the original email, the one that had started this entire investigation. She read it aloud in the conference room, her voice steady and professional. Wage deduction for unauthorized break time. Duration 5 minutes for personal bathroom needs. Preston's face went white. That was just, we have policies about bathroom breaks? Mr. Hawkins interrupted. You docked an employee's pay for using the bathroom? I sat quietly, letting the situation speak for itself. The absurdity was crystal clear when stated plainly. A manager who disappears for hours at a time, who abandons his team during crises, who takes 2-hour lunches and unscheduled personal days, was docking employees' pay for 5-minute bathroom breaks. The policy manual clearly states that reasonable personal breaks are expected and shouldn't exceed 10 minutes. Juliet continued. 5 minutes falls well within normal parameters. Preston looked around the room desperately, realizing that every person there could see the hypocrisy. He'd built his own trap, and now he was caught inside it. Mr. Hawkins didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Preston, you'll need to clear out your office today, he said quietly. Juliet will provide you with the termination paperwork and escort you through the process. Preston's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I've been here for 3 years. I have client relationships. I have institutional knowledge. You have a pattern of abandoning your responsibilities and micromanaging your team into compensating for your absence. Mr. Hawkins replied, That's not leadership. That's negligence. Security arrived without fanfare. No dramatic scene, no shouting match. Just 2 professional men in suits who waited patiently while Preston gathered his personal items from his desk. I watched him pack his golf photos and motivational posters, his hands shaking slightly. Part of me felt sorry for him, but mostly I felt relief. Cecilia and Nico stood beside me, all of us maintaining professional composure while internally celebrating. Preston looked at me one last time as he walked toward the door, carrying his box of belongings. I think he finally understood that this wasn't just bad luck or a misunderstanding. He'd created this situation through months of selfish choices. The office was eerily quiet after Preston left. His chair sat empty, and suddenly the whole space felt different, lighter somehow. Mr. Hawkins turned to me, Cecilia and Nico. "You three have been essentially running this department without supervision," he said. "The question now is whether we hire external management or promote from within." I felt my heart start beating faster. Cecilia nudged me slightly, a silent reminder of our conversation from weeks ago. "You're already doing the job," Mr. Hawkins continued, looking directly at me. "The clients know you, the team respects you, and you've proven you can handle crisis situations without abandoning your responsibilities." He paused. "Are you interested in making it official?" The question hung in the air. 6 months ago, I would have been terrified by the responsibility, but I wasn't the same person who had meekly accepted getting dock pay for bathroom breaks. "Yes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'd be honored." Nico grinned and Cecilia actually clapped her hands together once before catching herself. "Good," Mr. Hawkins said. "Juliet will work with you on the transition details." A week later, I was sitting in Preston's former office, my office now, installing a small whiteboard on the wall next to the door. I'd written a simple message on it. "Bathroom breaks are human rights, not privileges. Take care of yourselves." Cecilia and Nico laughed when they saw it, but I was serious. Some rules needed to be stated clearly so they could never be twisted again. My first team meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I'd prepared an agenda focused on fair workload distribution, transparent communication, and basic respect for everyone's human needs. The Bloom account was thriving under our direct management. The Hayline presentation had been a huge success. 3 new clients had signed with us after hearing about our collaborative approach. I looked out the window at the parking lot and saw my car in the space that used to be Preston's. It felt surreal, but also right. I hadn't set out to get Preston fired. I just wanted to be treated fairly. But sometimes standing up for basic dignity leads to bigger changes than you ever imagined. When I walked to the bathroom that afternoon, I took my time, knowing that no one would be timing me or docking my pay. It was a small freedom, but it felt enormous.